It's hard to sit in silence with you yapping away there, doggy. Learn your place.
I apologize that we become the unholy trinity. Hopefully they will behave. And though I don't normally like to read when I'm preaching, since Craig was kind enough to toss me Palm Sunday of all days, and because we had the retreat yesterday, I did want to put my thoughts on paper a little bit more. So, as we talked about in the retreat yesterday, to you that weren't there, we spoke about the concept of the idea of kenosis, which is, was this scolding?
No, I was.
Just making sure that she was the one that was being pointed out. WN.
We talked about the idea of kenosis, which is a fancy Greek word for what Jesus did, trying to explain how it was if Jesus is the Son of God, that Jesus left he didn't necessarily leave heaven, but somehow set aside the completeness of being divine to limit himself by being human. Sort of like if I were to allow myself to become one of these critters, I would give up certain attributes, set them aside. So, without speaking much more, lest I become accused of horrific heresies, the point is that this pattern of laying down parts of our lives, setting aside our own will or our own ego in order to be there for others, I believe is the path that Jesus showed us to unity, to transformation, to our spiritual journey, beginning with the incarnation through the crucifixion. And that what matters, though we reflect on the passion, what matters of the life of Jesus for us to follow is not simply the last 3 hours. What Jesus did in becoming one with us is set aside the limitlessness of his divinity to embrace our humanity. And as I quoted yesterday from Richard Rohr, he did so not to change God's view of humanity, wicked, depraved, and horrible wretches that we are, as some would say, but to change humanity's view of God as no longer the bearded judge in the sky waiting to accuse them. And so the salvation thereby attained was not that of repaying a debt, the classic view that because we are slaves to Satan, the way one redeemed a slave in classic Israel was to pay off the debt of the slave owed, nor to satisfy some sacrificial need to atone for human rebellion against God, like putting all the sins of the Israelites on a scapegoat and sending them out into the desert, or some other blood sacrifice to appease this God who rightfully had every reason to change the love that he had towards us because we had let him down. These are culturally bound misunderstandings that have been based on the religious concepts that were prevalent at the time the scriptures were written, tribal, pre-modern times. Now, unfortunately, for those of us who have lived through some parts of modernity into what they call the postmodern age, I'm not sure that enlightened modern thinking improved much on these concepts. It refined them. Religious authorities, especially influenced by Roman legalism, triumph of the Western church and then Western rationalism through the Enlightenment used sophisticated philosophical and theological arguments to reinforce this demonization of how humans have exercised their free will. I believe, in essence, in leading us on the spiritual journey, they chose the stick over the carrot. They chose fear of hellfire over the transformative power of unconditional love. Law and guilt over mercy, forgiveness, and redemptive love. And so we approach the Passion account as indicative of our own complicity with human fickleness and fecklessness, unfaithfulness, mob mentality, bullying, and morbid fascination blended with vengefulness. We are told to focus less on our call to compassion, to collaborate with compassion now, than on how our personal sins somehow mysteriously necessitated an ancient torture of an innocent Savior. The retributive justice atonement theories about the life of Jesus our Christ, I believe, thus reduce the meaning of his life to the final few hours. The restoration of our relationship with God that was intended with the incarnation is twisted beyond recognition. God so loved the world becomes God was so justified in hating the world that he sent his only Son. Fortunately, as you saw in the reading from Julian of Norwich, gory though it may have sounded, the mystical mind was preserved from accepting this distorted understanding. Although Julian of Norwich's medieval revelations of divine love dwell upon pretty graphic descriptions of Jesus on the cross, the result was that she was given the amazing conclusion that there is no wrath in God. The wrath that we ascribe to God for our sinfulness is our projection. That because we are so ready to judge and condemn and hate others, including ourselves, though we would rather project that onto others, God must also. But what Jesus in the Revelations revealed to Julian is that love was his meaning. And who reveals it? Love. And what did he reveal? Love. Why does he reveal it? For love. So ironically, and appropriately since our resident postmodern arrived, the postmodern mind, I believe, can overcome these distortions and retributive justice theories through its attentiveness to narrative ideas rather than logical arguments for absolute truths. The literal truth of what we read in the Passion accounts is much less important than how the Jesus story touches the hearts of each of us. So I believe that we must look at the overall arc of the story of Jesus that begins with kenosis, with his self-emptying incarnation, that originated when the Son person of the Trinity entered fully into the limits of our humanity in the most humble of ways. What we learn of Jesus from the accounts that admittedly were written well after his life, and that are colored by the memories and experience of believers, are colored by how their lives were transformed by encountering him personally or through the narratives about him. Throughout these stories, the theme of love, self-sacrifice, and forgiveness of others is what prevails, as does his absolute trust in his relationship with a prodigal divine Father. Now you may puzzle at that word prodigal because we hear the story of the prodigal son, but in fact it's the father who was prodigal, who abundantly loved rather than abundantly wasted. And Jesus' invitations in those stories to his followers were not about self-flagellation and condemning others and feeling horrible about their worthlessness. They were, love one another as I have loved you. Deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. What I have done for you is to give you an example. And his prayer, his prayer is that all may be one, just as the Son and the Father and the Spirit are one. That somehow the mystery that we can't quite park our heads around of how there can be a unity among three persons in one God, that God wants to open that unity up to include all of us as well. And to do so, to be so filled with love, we need to be empty. Richard Rohr, in the excerpt that was read today, notes that Jesus revealed a God who suffers with us. And in his suffering, he also models the way of kenosis, the acceptance of what is without resistance, the Buddhist concept of aversion, or clinging, the Buddhist idea of attachment, based on self-will or ego. So the excerpts of the Passion that I selected start with the Last Supper, where Jesus acknowledges he will be betrayed, and then goes on, not to fight it, but to give himself mystically for all the rest of time, saying, "This is my body, this is my blood, given so that sins may be forgiven." I think Craig rightfully paraphrases it differently when we say, "Given so that the unity of all may be restored." As revealed in the story I alluded to of the prodigal son, we see that the father had already forgiven the son even before he returned home. The father had been gazing out the window and ran to his son and never even listened to the apology. What was required was the restoration of their broken relationship through the son's acceptance of forgiveness. In the same way, when we receive the sacrament of the body and the blood, the bread and the wine, we can receive it as a sign of our acceptance of forgiveness and our invitation to oneness. And in so doing, we receive the grace of love to extend Jesus' eternal self-giving through service and sharing the suffering with others, here and now. That which was done thousands of years ago is eternally present for us now and always. In the Divine Dance, which we read an excerpt of, Rohr also says, whenever we love, we are in some way participating in the very suffering of God. The necessary self-emptying that must precede and make room for every infant. We embrace suffering when we give our lives to care for our families, our friends, or strangers in need. We embrace suffering when we stand with those on the margins and oppose the control of arrogant and unjust powers. We embrace suffering when we cannot live in it, yet walk beside those who need the reassurance that they do not suffer alone. We do so by reincarnating Christ in ourselves for the suffering. And in our own personal experiences of suffering, when we have done all that we can to relieve it, we surrender in trust to what we cannot understand, without resentment or resistance, as Jesus did. We can, like Jesus, authentically request that the cup of suffering passes by. Let us see to a wisdom that is beyond knowledge or understanding. The answer is no. Faced at times with betrayal or denial, we seek compassion towards those whose egos or misperceptions caused us harm. Faced with false allegations and unjust power, we silently trust in the unfolding of God's eventual redemption of all from evil. Like Jesus, we do not run to seek our security in anything other than God's embrace. We do not resist humiliation or rejection, because our ego is no longer at stake when we have our identity as the beloved one with divinity. And we do not strive to overcome control or enter into the power struggle. But we yield to the cross in order that we may be lifted up to look out over all the human brokenness that touches us and say with Jesus, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. And then, unlike Jesus, we add, and thank you that you have already forgiven me when I shared in the human ignorance of sin. Finally, we see in the gospel accounts, the stories of Jesus' narrative, that in our shared humanity, we may also honestly exclaim, my God, why have you abandoned me? And yet conclude, into your hands I commend my spirit. Because doubt is no stranger to the process of kenosis. The sense of abandonment by all that we thought we knew as certainty. All people, all faith, all content of religion that we thought we knew as certain truth is the final shred of our ego that must be surrendered to what St. Paul, yes, I'm quoting St. Paul, or paraphrasing, calls knowing the love that goes beyond knowledge. In the beautiful hymn where Paul talks about we know the length and breadth and depth and height of the love of God that goes beyond knowledge. How can we know something that goes beyond knowledge? We know it with our heart. we know it in that intimate way that love knows them. May we walk with Jesus through the way of the cross to the joy of the Christ, becoming one in the dance of divine love. And I want to close with a poem from Stations of the Cross, written by Brother Francis de Sales Wakeman. Says, staggering under the weight, strength is sapped. Life is poured out, anguish deeper than pain. Nothing is left. Nothing. And welling up, this nothingness cries out, yet its very sound is one of hope, faint and fearless. My God, why have you forsaken me? Ears are opened to the voice of sincerity, humility, faith. I can hear my memories, see my dignity, touch my identity. Something sterner than death arises, beating in harmony with a force other than being. There is light in its sails. This cross I have, I must be. Why is beyond the mind's eye, guarded by truth and love. The reply rises softly, lingers, prods. It is unmistakable, always present, rarely heard. If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me. This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him. Yes, by his wounds I have been healed. Lord, help me with this cross. Now I know it only makes sense if it is borne for another's sake. Mystery enlightens. Weakness is made strong. The back straightens, feet become steady. This cross is still here, but now it embraces all. Through, with, in, one. Truly, this man was the Son of God. My soul shall live for him, declaring to all, it is accomplished. These things the Lord has done by his cross. Amen.